Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another free real estate advice Friday. This is episode 49. We are going to talk a little bit about, is it a good time to buy? A very, very common question I get asked these days. So we will get into that a little bit. Um, One thing I want to continue to mention at the top of these is I'm always looking for guests on here. Typically, that will have nothing to do with real estate. In fact, I really try to get local small businesses involved. So last week we had Lori Ferry from Ironworks Fitness, who is not only my trainer and owns a gym locally as a small business, but also as a former client. So it's kind of an easy pick. But any local small business, charity, um, any sort of community role, nonprofit, whatever it may be, please, you're welcome to come on. I'd say typically guests are usually like anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes. Um, and we can talk about whatever you want. We don't have to talk about real estate. If we can tie in real estate, that's great. It is definitely not a requirement. It's really just meant to highlight local businesses. So if you know anyone that might be interested, please just hit me up in the comments, or you can message me, or whatever works for you. And I'm happy to have those on here. Um, yeah. So what else is going on lately? I didn't check the mortgage rates. Let me do that right now. Let's see what we're up to these days. But I'm sure they're not down. Let's see. Anyone who's watching, I do see a few people watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. All right, so 30-year mortgage rates as of now. Again, I'm just Googling it, so um, they're actually down a little bit over the past week or so. Um, According to like the standard Google result, which is, again, these are all subject to credit score and everything else, but running about 7.18, which doesn't sound very low, but it's been higher recently. And I always check kind of a second site. I'm seeing 7.08. I guess it's 7.18. Yeah, 7.18, 7.08. That's pretty much it. That's the quick answers. And, that's usually 7.06 I'm seeing. So, yeah. So let's call it 7.1. So, it's been higher recently. So the next question is like, the knee-jerk reaction to hearing 7% mortgages, especially if you've been in the market over the past few years, is like, oh my God, crisis, we can't do this anymore. It's important to keep historical perspective here. So this is still a historically low mortgage rate for sure. It is definitely not low compared to what we've had in recent history, but I've had a lender I had on a few weeks ago, Joe Bonaduce, referred to these as COVID rates, the 2 and 3%, and I think that is accurate. In a lot of the lenders' opinions, those rates are never coming back. Not to say that if you get into a 15-year, you do a refinance, something like that, maybe you can get somewhere down in that range. Or, and listen, I mean, no one can predict mortgage rates. They are very uncertain, and they're all over the place. So it's really hard to say. But let's talk about the people here who had planned to do something, and they've decided that it's not a good time because of the mortgage rates. So, and listen, ultimately, if you're one of those opportunistic buyers who was going to make a move, but then, because you saw rates at 3%, it's a good seller's market, you had to sell your house, then buy another one, get into a, 3% mortgage, kind of an easy decision. But if you're not an opportunistic buyer, then you're probably out once you see rates going up to 7-8%. That's fine. That makes sense. That's why the market is down. But if you have to move, you have to move. So that's kind of the people that I'm addressing today. So what kind of strategies can you take on? Again, the disclaimer, I'm not your lender. The best advice I can give you is to definitely talk to a good lender. I am happy to recommend good lenders. I have plenty in my sphere that I can recommend to you. But most important, I think, is that you want to get a strategic lender. You don't want to get a there's a there are bad lenders, that's for sure. And if you don't know, which no one would blame you for, I mean, people only get mortgages, a few times in their life. I happen to be exposed to it, so I'm happy to recommend anyone. But get a good strategic lender, because a good lender, again, referencing Joe Bonaduce that was on a few weeks ago, we actually talked about in that episode how every person is different. So there's so many factors. We talked to my friend Lori last week, who was self-employed. I too am self-employed, obviously. And that is a huge factor, because the type of loan that you might end up getting is different. If it's um, there's loans that take independent contractors like myself or Lori, and basically do what's called like a bank statement loan, where they just take all the money that you made over the past 2 years and break it into a quote unquote salary, and that's how they qualify you. So, um, you know, not everyone offers those loans. Good local lenders will offer those types of loans. But then when you start getting into talking about saving on interest because rates are 7 or 8%, you want to take into consideration what your options are. So on the buy side, if you start talking about buying points, which again, if you want to refer back to that episode 2 episodes ago, where Joe actually gave a brilliant explanation of what to take into consideration um, as far as buying points, because you can buy too many points and not put as much money down, and there is a diminishing return situation when it comes to buying points, but your lender can like literally just lay that out for you and say, hey, you know what? I'd recommend that you buy 1 point, but don't buy 2 or 3, because it's not going to pay off. There's actually a payoff, the number of months it'll take to pay off those points, in terms of like when you'll make your money back and break even. But a good lender will provide all that for you. Another thing that we're seeing a little bit more of, or definitely hearing more of, is the 2-for-1, 2-1 buyback. I haven't worked a whole lot directly with it. I do think it's brilliant. And what that is essentially, and again, not a, not a professional lender here, so I'll do my best. But essentially, what that is the way I've seen it be a very interesting option is actually for sellers. So sellers can offer, as part of the package for a home that they're marketing, to do a 2-1 buy down for the buyers. In other words, let's just take an arbitrary number. Let's say it's a $400,000 house, and again, these are arbitrary numbers. Again, not a lender, but let's say it's a $400,000 house, and for $14,000, the seller chooses to do a 2-to-1 buy down, 2-1 buy down. And what that is essentially is that for the first year of that loan, your interest rate will be 2 points lower. So they're paying off 2 points temporary, not like buying points when you get your mortgage. That's permanent. This is a temporary 2-1 buy down. So first year is 2 points down, second year is 1 point down, and then in the third year that is expired and you pay your normal mortgage rate. Almost the same idea as an ARM, but it's not built into the loan. It's a one-time temporary paid up front buy down. And we have kind of recommended this for sellers at times because it's a really good strategy to give buyers a really kind of fun incentive. I think a lot of buyers would be really psyched by that, because their monthly payment is going to be so much lower for those first 2 years when you're, getting established, especially if it's like an upgrade. It's like a second time home buyer that's buying a house that, they're kind of striving for. That's a very exciting prospect. It's a really great selling feature. So, listen, if you have the nicest house in town, it's still totally a seller's market. But if you have something that's, maybe, no, I don't want to say problematic, but it's not perfect. That's a really good program. That's a lot of saved money for on a month-to-month basis, and for like our first-time buyers, or someone that's really worried about the rates. That's great, because listen, at the end of that, you get that full 2 years, and then at the end of that, it's a really good chance that rates are going to be significantly lower. Then you can just refinance. I see, like, again, kind of checking trends on like TikTok and YouTube and all the other areas that I am scanning for up to date information, including talking to my own lenders in my sphere and whatnot. Um, there's a lot more strategy involved for sure. I think general advice that you'll see a lot is and this is very like old school standard real estate advice of marry the house, not the rate. Anyone with a 30-year mortgage that's had a 30-year mortgage for quite a while is going to tell you that you're not going to stick with that mortgage for 30 years unless you're one of those people that got the quote unquote COVID rates of 2.5 or 3%. Then sure, you probably will stick with that loan. But even people that got like 3.8, I think that my first house was either 4.2 or 3.8, somewhere there. I still had an opportunity to refinance. And then our current house, we've already refinanced twice. We've been there for 7 years. So, I wouldn't worry too much about that, 7 or 8%. Again, I'm speculating. I'm talking as a homeowner. I'm not talking as a realtor. That's definitely not in my lane. I would definitely tell you to talk to a lender, a little bit more thorough, but no one can predict rates. But that is something that makes that 2-to-1 buy down a lot more interesting and enticing, because it kind of lightens the load for the first 2 years, paid for by the seller. And then, you've got 2 years to say, all right, well, let's just refinance in 2 years. ARM loans are back. So it's funny to be talking about ARM loans again, because I think everyone thinks that of them as evil, kind of like buying points. Like, I think a lot of people just think those are bad things. I don't recommend any of these things because I'm not your lender. But I'm telling you they're out there, and that I think they're worth conversations because a lot of them have changed after what happened in, 06 through 08. The banks have changed regulations, and the terms have changed and everything else. It's just like PMI, like the standard talking point on PMI being, you got to put down 20% on your house or you're going to be paying PMI. And that's like a nightmare. It really isn't anymore. It's just so much cheaper now than it used to be. I remember when we bought our house in 2014, we were paying about $380 a month in PMI, which was horrible. I mean, it's like literally lighting money on fire. And I think a similar payment these days would be about $80 a month. We had to that was actually the first reason we refinanced, was to get out of PMI. So just a lot of those talking points are old and tired. It's absolutely nothing against other generations, but like if your parents, I'm in my 40s, and I still talk to a lot of people of different generations that give advice based on things that were definitely true when they were in these conversations. And stuff like that PMI advice, it's just dated advice. It's just not the same. I'm not saying it's bad advice. I'm just saying that the logistics have changed quite a bit. Same thing on ARMs. So that's an adjustable rate mortgage for those of you that don't know. The conversations have evolved quite a bit. So just telling you they're out there. Talk to a good lender. Don't talk to me about those things. Talk to a good lender. But if you need a recommendation for a lender, just let me know. So that's an interesting, we haven't put something like that in the seller's court in so long because everything just was selling so much. It's definitely still a seller's market. It's just softened a little bit because of interest rates. So this 2-1 buy down is just like an excellent way to just directly address what has tamped down that seller's market just a little bit. So it's definitely something to think about. It's a really interesting strategy. I would love one of my clients to take it on because I think it's really fascinating. But people don't love spending money up front for that kind of thing. There's a lot of things you could choose to spend money on. You could do staging. You could do the 2-1 buy down. You could do a project. You could put in a floor or update a vanity or do some landscaping. All those things are probably around the same price. So, but it's a really interesting strategy. I definitely think it would be fun if anyone would want to indulge me and take on that 2-1 buy down with a listing. I think it would be great. It's really interesting because I don't know. I think that there's a good chance that might have more impact than like putting in a new, like manufactured wood floor that would be of similar price, let's say like 10 grand. That's a really enticing offer. So that's that. My good friend, Mr. Angelo Yusuferi, asked a question, so let's bring that up here. Hey, buddy. What are your thoughts on partial appraisal waivers, appraisal gap coverage, now that the market is shifting? That's a really good question. The reason it's a really good question is because Angela is a really good agent. But let's leave it up there. Really good question. So, like, appraisal waivers. So let's talk a little bit about what that is. And thank you for the question, Angela, because man, I always love when people ask questions and I don't just have to ramble on. So appraisal waivers. Okay. So let's say that you're buying a $500,000 house. You are putting down, and again, I'm not a lender, so I'm going to explain this as best I can. You're putting down 100,000. So what's that? 20%. And you're borrowing 400,000 from the bank. And now when you get the house appraised, it's got to be worth at least what you're paying for it. Or the bank's going to say, we're not going to give you that money because the house is not worth it. If you stop making payments on the house, then we're in trouble. Now, what people were doing at the peak of the market was saying, well, we'll waive that requirement. So in other words, if they do the appraisal and the appraisal comes back at 300,000, there's going to be a gap. That's the appraisal gap of 100,000 because you needed the house to be worth 400,000 and you find out it's worth 300,000. These are extreme examples. They're never that far off. And if that comes up in the old days, and when I say old days, I mean about 3 years ago, you had an appraisal gap. Everyone just went back to the table and said, all right, unfortunately, it didn't come in. What do you want to do about it? And it would basically be renegotiated. A lot of times, everyone would just split the difference. The buyers would have to come up with more cash because the bank's not willing to cover that gap. Obviously, that's the whole issue. And the sellers would have to come down in price. The risk there would be like if it was backed up by they had a backup offer that was cash, they don't have to worry about that. So they might have to take that backup offer. But what was happening was when, we had 20 offers on everything is a lot of people were waiving appraisal. And what that means is, hey, we're going to use a mortgage and we are going to, if it comes in low, in my example, it needed to be 400, it came in at 300. If it comes in low, we'll cover it. No questions asked. We're not going to ask you to go back to the negotiating table. We will cover it. So what's the risk here? The risk is if you can't actually cover it, if that was just bravado or something like that, because a lot of times if it was a big number, we'd have to ask for proof of funds that they could actually cover it. But if they can't cover it, let's say it was 100,000, it ends up being 100,000. And then your attorney says, all right, well, you owe $100,000. And you say, I have 50. And that's it. I'm tapped out after that because you were being confident that it was going to come in right, but it ended up not coming in right. Now, obviously, there's all sorts of other nuances here. We can appeal the appraisal and all kinds of other stuff. But I would argue in real estate, things are always negotiable. But here's the thing: is you will be locked in. You will be under contract. And you will have a moment where it's realized, at least by yourself, that you can't pay it and you're under contract. So what would be the risk there? Again, not your attorney, but you could potentially lose your deposit minimally, if not get sued or something like that. So now that the market has shifted, okay, so, here's what I would say. It's been many years since I've had any appraisal issue. This is anecdotal that I'm speaking to. I think most realtors would probably agree with this, at least in this market, meaning regionally speaking, New Jersey. I haven't seen an appraisal not come in so long that it was a small concern to me. But what I will say is I was always relatively aware of my client's financial situation. I'm only so aware of it, basically what they share with me, because I don't really need to see their finances unless I've asked them to provide a proof of funds to the listing agent, or if I'm the listing side, obviously I would ask to see it. So if it was someone who I knew, for example, was downsizing, they were selling a big, beautiful property, they were downsizing to a much simpler life, they had tons of money in the bank, and we're talking past the point of ridiculousness. Like if I knew like 100,000 was like by all means absolute worst nuclear, worst possible outcome of it, but I knew they had 1.7 million in the bank, I would tell them what I think the risk is, but I knew that they could cover it. But if it was a first time buyer where they were already tapped out, if I didn't talk them out of it, their attorney did. So now that the market's shifting, prices aren't going down. I was going to talk about that a little bit today. So if prices aren't going down, I think my generic answer to that would be that I don't think the market shift really changes my opinion on appraisal waivers. You specifically mentioned, Angelo, I don't know if you're still listening, but you specifically mentioned partial appraisal waivers. If you're still on, let me know if you meant to specify something there. I'm just talking about appraisal waivers in general. But yeah, my opinion hasn't really changed on it. I just haven't seen the appraisal issues. I've had, multiple offers, both as a listing agent and as a buying agent, 70, 80, 90, 100 over asking at least. And they appraise just fine. Remember, appraisal is not simply market value. They almost always appraise higher. And a lot of times actually, like for a few situations I've had pre-appraisals on listings where I had a listing, I guess it was last year in Raritan Township, beautiful custom house on an interesting piece of property, very private, nice road. And there was so much customization and so many outbuildings and features and paid off solar and all these different things that I did ask them to get an appraisal before we list it so we could just get an idea on price point. And I think that's a good practice. The issue was that the appraisal came in like shockingly low. It came in lower than I had even estimated that they should sell the house for. And it really threw us. In that one case, it was not helpful. And, with anything in real estate, there are always these kind of one-off situations. And I think that was one of them where that didn't help us make any decisions. And we ended up selling it for more. And when we got the actual appraisal ordered by the bank for the people that were buying it, it appraised easily. But what ends up happening on that end of things is it complicates the conversation for sure. I'm working on another listing currently. It was appraised for 400,000. Based on its location, its condition, its usage, and everything else. We couldn't even come close to selling it for that price. Literally not even close. And that it causes certain clients, that's very easy to explain, that market value and appraisal are not the same thing. And for other clients, it causes a lot of challenges in explaining the difference between market value and appraisal. So, appraisals, that's an interesting one. I mean, I've said it many times, Angelo. I know you've heard me talk about it in many different avenues that the appraisals are really interesting because after all that mania, I just very rarely saw anything not fully appraised. So that's really interesting. Oh, here he is. Let's bring you back up here, buddy. Committing to covering potential gap between asking price and offer price with cash. Asking price and offer price with cash if going over asking, especially when comp history supports an over asking price offer. Yeah, I mean, I guess it would still come down to I guess my answer doesn't really change. I mean, I would just call that an appraisal waiver, just period. I think it just comes down to like how risk averse are your clients, and do they actually have the funds? Like, because like at the end of the day, like it's so unlikely that it would ever come to roost. I've literally in my career never had it happen. I did have one appraisal shortage, but they weren't covering it, and we're talking about $5,000. And it was a very specific example. I think it was kind of a fluke. but that's literally, as far as I can remember, that's literally the only time that appraisal wasn't covered. And that was actually in the previous market. It made no sense. It was, like I said, I think it was kind of a one-off thing. But yeah, I mean, I had a first-time buyer that we were in a very competitive bidding situation. It was getting a little out of hand. It was getting very intense. And Angelo, I don't know if in your situation you've ever had to explain how covering appraisal works, but it's not exactly the easiest thing to explain. It's not as simple as we would like to make it out to be, because there are, factors like, down payment and selling price versus loan price is definitely a factor. So it's pretty complicated. I generally just defer the conversation to my lenders. Todd Mershon, who I work with all the time, is actually really good at explaining it. So I've looped him into conversations. In fact, I looped him into that conversation, even though he wasn't the lender on the loan. I actually talk about bad lenders. I actually called the lender for this client, their lender. It was 8:00 on a night when the offer was due at like 9:00 for some bizarre reason. And this lender lit me up for calling at 8 p.m. Now, if you're in real estate and you haven't called a lender at 8 p.m., then, I would argue you're not a very busy realtor, because that's like, uh, we don't try to do that. That's definitely not ideal. I mean, especially at my house, I mean, that's wrapping up dinner and getting the kids to bed. But, there's definitely times we have to call a lender at 8:00. I mean, that's nothing. I've been on the phone with my attorneys at 11:30 p.m. I've that's a different story, but getting a call at 8 p.m. and getting lit up by the lender is troubling. So what did I do? I called Todd Mershon, who's now currently with Movement Mortgage, probably my main lender, and I said, Todd, can you help me talk your non-client through what an appraisal gap would look like? Because there is formulas. We use spreadsheets. I mean, we went through the whole thing, and ultimately, because this was a first-time buyer, he didn't feel comfortable, and actually I was getting uncomfortable. I did not feel real good for him. So we ultimately decided to just pull the offer. But that's someone I'm still friendly with and still in touch with today. And I think because he saw that process of not only talking to Todd, but also me, like kind of tagging along and being like, yes, your lender, no good, didn't want to talk to you. Let me get you a good lender to talk to. Let me make sure that he can walk you through this with exact numbers, make you feel comfortable in your decision. And if you ultimately decide to pull out of it, everyone's good with that. There's no pressure here. And that's exactly what happened. And, I think that was a really good show of, the team that I work with, and saying like, we do business a little bit differently. We're not just in this for, a quick buck. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Ange, you're a great agent at this point. Do you have any specific thoughts? Ange, by the way, you can just join this podcast if you'd like. I don't know if you want to, or you planned on it, or if that makes you nervous or anything, but if you want to keep typing stuff in, I'm happy to have you kind of drive this conversation along. You are welcome to join if you'd like. It'll take a matter of seconds for me to send it over to you. But yeah, good question. And thank you for asking a question. Yeah, appraisal gaps. A lot of people were doing it, and we saw crazy appraisal gaps. We saw ones that clearly weren't going to work. That meant, we didn't take offers because we saw people waiving appraisal gaps that were like, there's no way, you're qualified to cover this, and they wouldn't provide proof of funds or whatever. But that's interesting. Gotcha, Angelo. Angela just mentioned that he's eating a Big C's cheesesteak at the moment, which is a great spot. Andrew, is that Scotch Plains? Or is that, shit, don't tell me. South Plainfield? What town is that technically in? Big C's is a food truck somewhere in South Plainfield, Scotch Plains, somewhere in that area. But they make awesome cheesesteaks. So I won't ask him to get on camera with his cheesesteak. But yeah, so let's talk about pricing a little bit, because actually I did want to talk to that, and it's a really good Plainfield border. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because it's right next to the Plainfield High School football field. I think I told you I played there in a past life as I believe I was a sophomore in high school, and that is the site of where I got hit the hardest in my entire life. And yeah, it's a very funny story, which I'm not going to bore everyone with right now. But I was literally eating my cheesesteak, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's the site of the crime. Like, I definitely remember that very well, and I hadn't seen it since then. It's very funny. But yeah, that's right. That's right on the Plainfield border. So yeah, check out Big C's if anyone needs a good cheesesteak, or they have burgers and all kinds of stuff, but it's really good. So pricing. One of the talking points that I hear all the time is we're waiting for prices to go down. So that is definitely a flawed approach. I had a couple clients specifically that were using this argument for years, and I know what they ultimately eventually did, which is move out of the area. But they were really waiting for prices to come down. But here's a news flash for everyone: prices are not going down. It's not going to happen. Will prices slow down? Yes. Will they literally go down? No. That's it's almost definitely not going to happen. So you don't hear me say a lot of like absolutes on here, but I would feel very confident telling you that prices of houses will never go down. At in the short term, who knows what could happen? Something catastrophic would have to happen for prices to actually go down. But I mean, look at over. And then, within a month period, like maybe they'll go down within a month and then go back up. Like, sure. I mean, that could happen. But first of all, it's really hard to quantify that. Like, you don't actually know that prices are like going down. It's not like a big thing. Like, I'll be on here one day saying, guys, you're getting great bargains on houses right now. Because, real estate appreciates. And with the current economic situation, there's no expectation that prices are going down. I mean, go buy what's something I've purchased recently that's like super expensive. I mean, gas obviously, but I was like the taco kits like you make for dinner. Or no, here's a great example, like 12-pack of Diet Coke. I went the one day, they weren't on sale or anything. I was just buying the regular price, but this is at a grocery store, not like a convenience store or anything else. And it was $9.49. And I was like, what? And it was like the first thing I bought because it's something I buy all the time that I was like, my God, prices are insane. So factor that in for one thing. Now, obviously, that's going to get better. Definitely. And probably, relatively speaking, relatively soon. But real estate's not going to stop appreciating. The rates are going to go down, most likely. Inflation's going to slow down. It's you're going to get all the buyers back. So it's just going to be a long time before we see it like a shift in the market. And when I say shift, I just mean moving from a seller's market to a buyer's market. I don't see that happening anytime soon. I really don't. Again, just my opinion. I'm not an economist. I'm not a lender. I can't predict interest rates. I can't predict pricing, but I'm giving you a pretty educated guess. But not a total. I'm not totally naive to it. I am an MBA graduate. And I am, as far as realtors go, I do like to say that I'm on the more educated side, which was not intentional. That's just how I ended up here. So, and that is not meant to be any sort of dig at other realtors, because quite frankly, those student loans that I have for that MBA that I barely used, I would love to just put those away. It's not like I tout my MBA pedigree as a realtor, but yeah, so I just don't see prices going down. So if that's your argument, like we're going to wait until prices go down, that's probably not going to happen. What makes right now a really good time to buy more than anything else, and it is unquestionably a good time to buy right now, is that there's no competition right now. Relatively speaking, there is so little competition. If the rates go down, what do you think is going to happen with the competition? We're going to be bidding up houses again. Right now, sure, houses are still going over asking. That is for sure. But where we used to have 15 offers, we have 6 offers. Where we used to have 6 offers, we have 3 offers. Where we used to have 3 offers, we have 1 offer. So, things still sell quick. My last listing sold very quick. There was 2 offers though. And there were none behind it. That's why we closed it out after 2 offers. That was the best move. And the offer was fantastic and it was over asking price and it was great, but there wasn't 20 of them. So prices aren't going down. That's not a good reason to hold off. Take advantage of the fact that you're not bidding up another 50 grand than you thought you would, and then financing that 50 grand. Sure, you would have been financing it at a lower rate, but you're still financing it, and it's going to be very expensive over the course of that loan. So, take solace in that and grab a house, especially this time of year, because like the competition's even lower and people still need to sell homes. So keep your eyes open. I'm going to say the same thing I say all the time. If you follow me on TikTok, the few of you that are on here, you notice I've been stressing a lot of mortgage talk lately, because I do see a lot of people holding off on getting their pre-approvals, more so now, because I think they think because of the rates, because of the situation, that there's no reason to rush. But I always tell people, like, there's no reason to not just go get your pre-approval. First of all, it's very tedious. Get the work out of the way, especially when you're not scrambling to do it because you already found the house. Second of all, it takes some time. And third of all, like, they're going to do a credit inquiry. That's it. That's the only like negative. That's like such a minuscule thing. And if you are looking to buy, but you have time, by the time you actually need to qualify and close and get through underwriting, that credit inquiry is going to be gone. So you're always better off getting it early. So I think a lot of people just wait too long. And then you run a very specific risk of running through houses and looking at houses and getting expectations around something that you may have never qualified for, or the total opposite, which happens all the time, is that you qualify for way more and you're actually comfortable with the payment. You just didn't think you'd qualify for it. So just get qualified. It's super easy. As far as qualifications go, we do have a checklist I'm happy to provide to anyone who needs it. Let's see if I have it handy. Be good if I had it handy. There's a specific list that we have here that is provided by one of our lenders of what makes a good pre-approval. Let me see if I can pull that up, because that would actually be a really good thing to share. I did have it on my desk here at one point, but I don't anymore. But I believe I do have an email copy. But yeah, one of the bigger mistakes that people make all the time. It's funny. I just went to get this thing, and I see that one of the mortgage companies that I deal with is advertising that there was a huge rate drop this week. It's true. It definitely is true. They're actually showing 6.25. This is an email from literally right now, and they're showing 6.25% for conventional 30-year. So yeah, that would be a big rate drop. So, again, looks like we are moving in the right direction as far as that goes. But let me see if I have that pre-approval thing. And if you're still listening and you happen to have that handy, do you want to show it to me? I almost definitely do have it. It's hard to multitask and find it. But I think that would be a good way to wrap things up here. Nothing like some good dead air on here too while I'm looking for that. I know where it is within this office too, but I'd have to walk away from the mic, which I really try not to do. So, all right. Well, I think it probably would be a good thing to look at that next week anyway, if I can't find it shortly. But yeah. Hey, listen, I saw a lot of watchers today, and I appreciate that. Always nice to see a few people watching in real time. Most of these things get most of the views after the fact. And that's totally fine. This is what it is. A lot of times I started actually taking clips from it and posting the clips, because I think that's a more palatable way for people to digest these things. They're not really meant to be things that are watched straight through necessarily, unless I have a guest or something that's a little more interesting than me just rambling. But as always, if you know anyone, small business, charity, community personality, I actually was just thinking on the way over here, my kids are in Union Township Recreation, and I'm a coach over there. Great program. It's just brilliantly run. It's way better than what I had as a kid in this area. And I was thinking I should have one of the leaders of Union Township Recreation come over. But that, just as an example, it doesn't have to be a business. It could be any sort of community involvement type thing. It can also be online businesses. Doesn't matter. I mean, this is broadcast all over the place. This is going to LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. So whatever you want to promote, please come on and chat with me. So, all right, I will wrap it up. Listen, I hope you all have a great Friday. Stay healthy out there. So much kids with the upper respiratory stuff is kind of scary. So please stay healthy, and hope everyone's doing well. And I hope we should have these going for a little while. I'll probably take a break off or a break the day after Thanksgiving, but other than that, these should be here. So, and excuse my lights going on and off behind me. But anyway, hope you're all doing well. If you have any questions that you want me to ask next week, just hit me up and I will be sure to do those. In the meantime, shoot over to my YouTube channel. You can see all the past episodes, like and subscribe. And I'm on TikTok as well with a couple clips here and there, and follow me on there too. And that should be enough of me that you need. So, hope you're all doing well, and I will talk to you all soon. Take care.